Welcome back to the BookEnds YouTube channel. I'm nervous. I am also James McGowan.
And I am Jessica Faust, and today I'm in charge.
Yeah, well, quick note, if you've been following along on the BookEnds channel, then you know that we have been having all the agents on for a quick conversation with the two of us. But today, I'm in the hot seat, and while I really enjoyed putting Jessica in the hot seat, I am not so much enjoying this. So I'm just going to hand it off.
I'm excited.
I'm not.
So, I'll be nice. So in coming up with my questions, I really came up with things that I didn't necessarily know and wanted to ask you. Started here as an intern and how you moved through the ranks and how you're now representing clients of your own. But there are some things that I thought I never really knew. And and, you know, I know it's not unusual, but to me, it always feels a little unusual when somebody in this business starts on the agenting side. And I think that's probably primarily because that wasn't my career path. It wasn't Kim's. It wasn't Jessica's. We all started on the editorial side. I think in some ways there were more job openings and entry-level positions on the editorial side. So that might be where why a lot of people start there. But my question to you is, whether it was before starting at BookEnds or even while you were working here, have you ever considered that maybe you would want to be on the editorial side?
I think I started off wanting to be on the editorial side. I think everybody really does, like you said. I think that it is sort of the more natural inclination, but probably because editors are just better known than agents.
Yeah, well, I think until you get into this business, people don't know
what agents are. Yeah.
Right.
And I think it's fair to say I fell into it. So I applied to a boatload of internships, and I think I got 2 responses. One was from BookEnds and Beth Campbell, and one was from, I don't remember, it was an agency though. And it was basically, we'll keep your resume on file. We're not looking for interns right now. Nobody else responded, which, fun fact, is why I make it a point to respond to every intern candidate that ever sort of reaches out to me. Yeah, but then I was here and I never left, which is the joke we always say. And after a while, I never wanted to leave. And I think it was like a switch while I was here.
Right.
So
right.
I interned in summer of 2015. And when I had to leave, but then I came back, and then I was like, nope, I don't want to go anywhere. When you brought me back for that winter semester that I was there for in 2016, I knew I didn't want to leave. It felt a little different. It felt a little different that time around. I think because I had the foundation of a regular internship, and I was coming back, and you had me doing different things. And then that's when I sort of fell in love with it, and really fell in love with BookEnds in general, and just never left.
No, you haven't. That's good.
Yeah.
We're happy for that. So when you started at BookEnds, and I'm terrible at the timelines, as you will know, but it was either before or about the time that BookEnds Junior started.
Just before.
Right, just before. Which is interesting because you started at an agency that had no children's books, and yet that is primarily your list. So did you know that you always wanted to do children's books?
No. So I started at BookEnds. I was still in college. I was finishing up my undergrad and starting grad school, and my last 2 semesters of undergrad I spent in independent studies with the kidlit genius at College of Staten Island, Lara Sigisig, and she basically introduced me to the whole world of it, of picture books, board books, middle grade. She's a writer herself. So yeah, and then that's where I sort of, got my own legs there. But when I came back in 2016 to officially be your assistant, Tracy Marchini was already here.
Right.
And that's where I kind of found myself glued to her hip a little bit about picture books and learning everything I can. And I tell everybody, Tracy was my picture book mentor. She taught me so much about them in terms of just what works, what doesn't work, how to submit them, how to do all that stuff. So I didn't know, and then I kind of fell into it.
Tracy's really good at that. She's been such a great mentor to all of our BookEnds junior people, really.
She's got a great, she's got a teaching quality, I think. And she does it really subtly too, where she lets you kind of come to what you need to come to, just to praise Tracy a bit. But yeah, no, she nudged me a lot in terms of understanding nonfiction too. We have a co-client together, Jessica Kulekjian, who is doing really amazing things. And sort of through working with Tracy and Jessica, I understood picture book nonfiction and sort of what stands out, what doesn't. And I made a ton of connections with editors. Yeah, so it was through really working with Tracy on her clients and also with Jessica that I fell in love with picture books and even began to start my hand at writing them because Tracy is also a writer. So yeah, we are picture book pals, me and Tracy.
You've also, I think, picked up that mentoring aspect from her. I mean, I know when Emily has come aboard, you have really been a guiding hand in helping her get situated into BookEnds and
Oh, well, that's
publishing in
nice to
general.
hear. I never would have thought of myself that way. I think that what's been really cool is I've been involved in the onboarding of 6 agents at BookEnds now. Yeah, it's really cool. And I think we've got down to a science now in terms of what they need to do, what they need to know. And I was sort of with many of them learning with them too. So I think that I don't know. I think I've got that same sort of, this is what you need right now. This is what will come later. And this is where to start. So
Right,
that's
right.
cool.
No, that makes sense. So you're also a writer.
I am.
And you are a picture book writer. And I guess this kind of goes back to my previous question. Is that something you always envisioned for yourself, or is that something you sort of fell into?
So you know that game MASH that everybody plays when they're kids, or like you've got a, no, you never heard of it? MASH was this thing, my cousins used to do it all the time, where you like put down your job and all these things, and like you go through and it's supposed to like predict your life. And author was always under career for me, but I never wrote. So it was like one of those things that had to materialize or just was never going to happen.
Right.
And I read Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic. Yeah, so I listened to Big Magic going home from interning, and I don't know, there was something about that book that just sort of clicked for me, and that's when I started writing, and me and Tracy did a whole bunch of manuscript swaps, and I found a critique group, and I just sort of went from there. Yeah, and Naomi came on right about the time that I started writing, and she asked the entire group, like, any fellow writers here? And me, her, and Tracy connected over it, and one thing led to another, and sort of we all just support each other and work together on what we're writing, and it's a really cool little sub-community we've created at BookEnds, and I'm grateful for it.
That's really funny because I think that so many in the writing community assume and think that to be an author and to be published, it has to have been this passion that you've had your entire life.
Yeah, and in a way, it kind of was. It was just one that I was lazy about. I never did it. And I mean, I took a bunch of writing classes. My major in college was writing. But yeah, it can start at any age, at any point. It doesn't have to be something that you've been, making books when you were 4 on paper. Like,
Right.
it doesn't have to be that. Yeah.
Right. It doesn't have to be the first book I wrote was when I was 8. It could, yeah.
Yeah, you can start. I mean, look at all of the success stories that started their books at 50, 60, 70 and got published. I've never been one to sort of ascribe to any sort of rules about writing. And I don't write every day. I don't, all of those things that people sort of give you that advice on Instagram or wherever you are, I don't follow any of it. I write when I want to write. I write what I want to write. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't. And I think I also have I think I have the bonus of working with books every day. So the people that don't work in publishing and want to write, that's their thing, right? So for me, I get to work with books every day. That my writing is the second thing for me. So I guess that's probably why I take some of that mindset for it. But
I think that's an interesting perspective because I think when we're on social media and things like that, I mean, I can already hear people potentially getting mad because you are a very soon to be published author, and yet in their minds, you don't live and breathe it and eat it enough, and it's unfair that you have this book deal, but there's no sort of rhyme or reason of what a writer needs to be.
Yeah, and you know something, for the longest time I had a lot of insecurity about it too, because I felt the same way. And I
Right.
mean, announcing the book and sort of boosting it on Twitter and social media, I felt like, well, I have this, I work in publishing, and it feels like others might think that what you just said, like I've had this leg up. But I received the rejections, and I have queried, and I've done all of that.
Yeah.
But no, I totally understand that, and it's something I'm really conscious of. And that's why I think I spend so much of my time trying to make it as transparent a process as possible from Bookends and from us on the channel, because I recognize it and I know it's hard, and I don't ever want to seem like that guy. So yeah.
No, I think that's great. And so, why picture books? And if you tell me because they're short.
It's not because they're short, because they are equally as hard. My bedroom closet door is like my bulletin board, and I have 4 color Post-its up at the corner, which is my little key, and I throw the Post-its up there, and I just feel like that's my workspace, and I put my drafts up and everything. So they're not short. I've been working on a draft that's been on my door for like 3 months now. Ask Naomi, she will tell you. um, I think that's just what I gravitate towards. That's where the ideas come to me, and I follow that. I don't. I mean, I've had a bunch of chapter book and middle grade ideas, but when I sit down to write it, it doesn't flow out of me the way a picture book does. And hey, picture books don't flow out of me, but they're a little easier for me than writing middle grade or something. I can't do what well, at this point in my writing career, I can't do what those writers who write middle grade and these expansive worlds do. It's just not where my attention span, I think, is at. And I love
Mhm.
picture books. My list is picture books. My clients, it's really what I talk about 75% of the time. So it
Right.
just feels like the most natural step for me. And that's what comes naturally.
I mean, yeah, and I think that, I mean, would you say that writing what you write is sort of does come naturally and is sort of
Yeah.
for a lot of writers, like that's just kind of where you're meant to be? I mean, I think it is for agents to some degree, like what we represent, while we try to vary our list, there is a little bit of, but this is where I'm meant to be.
Yeah. And for me, it was where I got started too. Like my first writing class that I felt actively engaged in was that independent study where I was talking about picture books and reading the classics and the new classics and really understanding how they're made and their 32-page structure and all of that. So for me, it was just kind of my entry point. And some people might go beyond that entry point, but it's kind of where I
Mhm.
stuck, both in Bookends and here. It's where I am.
Sure.
I
All
sort of
right.
nestled myself in.
So you mentioned a couple times like taking classes and writing classes, and you also have your MFA,
I
which
have an MA,
an MA, which
yeah, which
we
is even more useless to me. So,
which we have joked about in a fun way, I
yeah.
think. Um, but so, I think a lot of people, whether they want to get into publishing as an author or as a professional, industry professional, often look towards academia and school and classes. And that's, of course, only natural. I didn't have that opportunity. I mean, I guess I could have, but I didn't take it. I was a journalism undergrad. I knew nothing about publishing, and I just went into the business. Um, I was lucky that way. But how would you say your experiences in learning about publishing and writing and publishing through your writing classes are different or even the same as reality?
Yeah, we've talked about it a bunch, and I know it's probably not the right thing to say that I joke that my MA was a waste of my time, because I learned a ton and I made great connections. But I think for me, working in publishing and getting my MA, I realized the disconnect between those two things. Um,
Right.
the professors that were sort of guiding me and teaching me were a bit removed from publishing, and they didn't know, like, there were people encouraging me to put things in my query letter that I knew for a fact don't go in query letters, or are no longer necessary, or just were a bit antiquated and things like that.
Yeah.
So for me, I wanted that MA, and that's why I did it. And an MFA program might be very different. I've not been in an MFA program. They might be more in touch. I can't speak to every program too. But the
Right.
best thing I did was stack my shelves full of books from thrift books that I can refer to at any time, read them, work with my clients on them, and just immerse myself in the actual books. So
Right.
I think that there's a lot to learn there in terms of like language and the history and stuff like that, and just grow in that way. But did it make me a better writer? I'm not certain. As terrible as
It
that
made you
sounds.
right. I
But
guess it
and
made you right
also
though.
right, and yeah, it made me right. And also, I went to a program that was very unconcerned. Is that a word? Unconcerned with
Mhm.
Kidlit. And when I had
Mhm.
a writing teacher ask us, what can the program do differently? And we brought up Kidlit, that'll never happen. So yeah, for me, it just felt disconnected. And I don't think I really took anything from that. And maybe what I could have taken, I already pushed off because, hey, you're disregarding the things that I wrote, you know? And I wrote
Yeah.
stories in my class and like, why are they kids? Well, because they're kids. What do you mean? Kids are not real? Kids don't read?
Right.
And I think that's where writing programs have to catch up
Mhm.
and recognize the importance of Kidlit. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did. And I think that's somewhat been my experience from working with interns and people coming here out of college is that I often find that I need to sort of correct the advice we've been given about publishing, and even sometimes like trying to find a job in today's world is that I
Yeah.
don't always feel that they're getting the same advice that they would be as having the experience would give them.
Right. And I think coming out of college, undergrad or grad, we are given two different libraries, right? Like when we're picking our own books, we're picking what we gravitate towards. We're picking recent things. We might even just be plucking things off the bestseller, but they're current and they're recent books instead of
Right.
reading like the classics, which are great to read and everybody, if you're interested, should dive in and read them. But it's a separate education, I think, because writing has changed from then.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That an English degree on how to sort of analyze classics isn't really anything like what publishing is.
No, and I mean, we take some of those skills, right? Understanding character and all of that, but I don't know. I don't think you're getting the same sort of understanding of how things are being written, what's being written now, that you can really attribute to understanding publishing the business.
And how people read. I
Right.
mean, our job is really to understand the reader. And so that is obviously difficult on a book that the reader doesn't usually pick up on a regular basis voluntarily.
Yeah, and also like the pacing and the level of attention that I think people give books now is a little different than what it was then. I
Of
mean,
course.
or maybe just because language has changed so much and they feel removed from what we're reading. But I mean, pick up any 19th century British book. That's not how we're talking. That's not what we're reading. That like we're reading things that keep our attention and pacing, and we want that, like can't put down, which I don't feel those books have. And
Well, it
maybe
was a
some people
different,
do.
no, it was definitely a different time. They didn't
Yeah,
have all the distractions that we had.
right.
So, we had authors today need to really be able to grab a reader because you're not fighting just against other books. You're fighting against TV and movies and phones and all of these other things.
Exactly. And alternatively, you're being read on those devices where
Hmm.
the notifications are coming through. So it's about keeping attention, which I think you need to read current books now to get a better understanding of how to do that for today's market.
Right, right. No, I would agree.
Yeah.
So my last question is a sort of a twofer. Um, what advice would you give to both young agents and new authors from your own experiences, or and I think we've sort of discussed this in previous videos, but it's always a good one. Like, what things have you learned that you would, say to people to keep in mind?
Um, yeah, I think that the two most important things that I've learned at BookEnds are number one, to not be ashamed of asking so many questions. I ask a ton of questions.
Ton of questions.
Okay. I do, but even whether the first of all, no such thing as stupid questions is not true. I recognize I ask a lot of stupid questions. But I think I don't know, I think just be unafraid to ask those questions, whether they're about contracts, because I want to be certain that I'm learning things right. Or just, hey, do you know what this editor like? I mean, I think asking those questions will help you develop the foundation of publishing, because there's so much you need to know to be an agent. So
And I would, well, I'm sorry. What I was going to say is one of the things I think you're good at that I really want to mention is that it's not just questions. It's clarification. A lot of times you come to me and it's not really, what do I do here? It's not this open-ended question like you're looking for somebody to do the work. It's, I'm doing this. Is this the best way to go about it? Isn't there a better way? It's not always even just like, how do I do this? It really is like, is this the best way? And how can I improve on this? And things like that. And I think that's really important to note. It's not just the, what is this thing called the fax machine questions?
Yeah, well, I had those too. Especially when I started. Beth Campbell, who used to be at BookEnds, taught me how to address an envelope. So it's something I was never taught. No, but yeah, I think learning all of that stuff, you can read it and you could over and over again, but it takes like a level of practice for it to digest and sort of become second nature. So I think having you and other agents at BookEnds to be like, hang on, I'm doing this, and I know this is what this book says, but is this the right way to do it? I don't know. I think that has made me a better agent and sort of built my understanding of things a lot stronger.
But I also think that's the exact same thing that makes a better author a more successful author.
Agreed.
We know when you are new to this business that you know nothing. So to call your agent or to ask your agent, what's the next step? What's happening now? What should I be doing? Is this normal? What can I, all of that is great. That's what we're here for. And, and the more you know, the more successful you'll be, because the more empowered you'll be in your career.
Right. And there's a lot of, I've seen it often, like, well, you hire an agent for that. You do hire an agent for those business decisions and things like that. But knowing what's happening, like you said, you are a little more empowered. You are much more confident. And I think confidence is one of the most important things in publishing and writing career. So I think asking those questions and being unafraid to ask them so that you have a better understanding will only benefit you in the business side, but also in your writing side.
Agree.
And the other thing I was going to say is that I feel like I had a lot of preconceived notions of what I was going to be doing.
Yeah.
And I think when we started, I was only going to be doing thrillers and mysteries and stuff like that. And my list is not that, which I still love mysteries and thrillers, and I am down to find a great one. But I branched out. Like, I never would have thought I'd do middle grade. I was hung up on YA. I don't know if you remember that. I read a ton of YA, and I stepped away from that. So I think I'm very controlling, and I like to have plans, and I like to have, steps that I'm going to follow. And I think letting some of that go a little bit and letting things happen how they have to happen was something that you taught me a lot of, especially in negotiating too. Like, I like to think, okay, well, then I will do this. But, you can get a curveball at any moment, and letting those curveballs not really rattle me has been a lesson that I'm grateful to have learned.
Flexibility is huge in any life. And I think that even goes back to the conversations we have about authors who have these very defined business plans of how they see their career going. But, any shift in the market can throw that off completely.
And they are unpredictable. They are sudden. And they just happen. And it's not just market too. Your agent could leave the business. You could wake up and be like, we're not working and I'm going somewhere else. Yeah. Or you could wake up, and I have done this many times, and say, that book is never going to work. It's just not. Now I have to start something new because I'm trying and I'm writing myself into a corner, and I'm just not the person for this book right now.
Right. Totally.
Confident in flexibility, I think, is important.
I would agree. I think that was great.
Oh, good. Well, that's not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
No,
I guess we're both talkers, so it worked out.
We are. And I'm actually more impressed with myself, if I may, because I had a really hard time trying to come up with questions that I felt like we haven't talked about in a million times already.
Yeah, I have the same problem coming up with your questions because, we have those anecdotes that we just continue to share over and over again. It's like when you listen to a podcast for too long and you're like, I've heard the story, man. Like, enough.
So I hope we didn't bore you.
Yeah, I hope it was helpful.
Yes.
Well, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we hope to see you back here next time with some other agent in the hot seat. I'm glad I'm done.
Yeah, and don't forget to check out, we have a whole playlist where we've had conversations with all of us here at BookEnds, so check it out.